Saturday simulcast with Brian Neubert and Tom Dienhart. And the band is together this week. It's been a couple of weeks since we've all visited on this. Not that we visit just about every day during the business week, but a lot to hit on in this show. We want to thank our sponsor, and that's the Purdue Union Club, or the Union Club Hotel at Purdue. It's a Travel and Leisure World's Best Hotel in Indiana nominee. Voting is now open at the PurdueUnionClubHotel.com. For more details and to show your Purdue pride, visit that website. All right, I'm going to start. Obviously, Tom, we're transfer portal, and I know Brian also deals a great deal with recruiting, but Purdue did get a kicker this week. There sounds like there may be more. I mean, who knows, but there may be more to come. And yet they've also moved the deadline date back for this year. Bring us up to date. You know, Mitchell Finneran commits to Purdue as a kicker, but just the view of how this is going to continue to work and how the rules will change in 2022 in terms of timing as compared to 2021.
Yeah, boy, Purdue's been awfully aggressive in the transfer portal. It'd be kind of fun to be able to, once the dust settles in late July, to really get a debits and credits for every Big Ten school to see maybe who's got the most transfers coming in. I know Michigan State's been crazy, I guess, as far as bringing players in, but I digress. Purdue's been very active, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's great. The portal for a school like Purdue is a godsend, I think, allows you to upgrade your roster immediately. Obviously, every school can do that, but for Purdue, I think maybe sometimes you can even get a higher quality athlete than maybe you could coming right out of high school. You get a motivated athlete too, hopefully. And again, defense, the defense has been the big priority for Purdue. 5 transfer portal additions, 4 from the SEC, 2 linemen, a linebacker, 2 cornerbacks. And then, yeah, Alan, you talked about the kicker. We knew Purdue was in the market for a kicker. Very unsettled spot this spring. J.D. Dellinger's gone. And Mitchell Friedman, I think he's a nice pickup. You know, I got a chance to talk to the kid from Sanford, which is in an FCS school in Birmingham, Alabama, beautiful campus there. And he was all Southern Conference this last year, and he's going to bring a veteran's presence to that position, which they need. And as you guys know, as longtime football fans, if you're going to have a good team, a good season, you're probably going to need at least 1 or 2 big kicks to be hit for you. And I'm sure Braum feels much better knowing he's got a veteran that they could try out on the field for 2021. And this kid's got 2 years of eligibility as well, for what that's worth. And then, of course, the other addition was of note of late was the Indiana transfer defensive tackle DeMarge Lewis. Was committed to Auburn at a high school from Griffin, Georgia. His cousin, Brandon Callaway, is committed to Purdue. He's going to get here this summer. He's a D-back. I'm told that was a big part of Lewis's commitment to Purdue. Get a chance to play with his cousin. And Mark Hagan, the Purdue D-line coach, actually recruited DeMarge Lewis to Indiana when Mark was still a Hoosier assistant. Of course, Mark left before he signed, went to Texas. Lewis signed with IU, didn't play last year. So there's familiarity there for DeMarge Lewis, knowing his position coach and Mark Hagan. So, again, some nice moves by the Boilermakers. And as Brian knows, too, the Boilers probably aren't done yet shopping in the portal.
Yeah, Brian, one of the things that's interesting about that is still the need to recruit to the end, so to speak, because these kids are not, if I understand it right, are not really committed. I'm not saying they're going anywhere, but you want to get them on campus, so to speak. And Purdue will hopefully, I think, is still planning on doing that the first week of June. But the deadline's July 1st this year to shut it off. Next year, May 1st. But there's some dynamic, Brian, that is there that, guys could still get poached, I suppose, until the very end in this deal.
Yeah, I mean, all of the same chaos principles that have taken hold over the high school recruiting cycle over the span of many years all can apply to this deal too. It's, if you get a commitment from a transfer right now, that player is still fair game until he gets to your campus, which if you're recruiting transfers and you're counting on them to come in and help you right away and to start competing to do so in June, and they're still open to hear from other schools up until the end of May, that can make for some nervous moments here. It's also going to change the way that I think, coaches talk to recruits. I think it's the way it changes the way they recruit the high school classes, because I think, you're smart nowadays to keep recruiting guys who might have committed somewhere else, keep building that relationship, kind of all of that stuff. Make sure at all costs you leave on very positive terms if a kid goes somewhere else, because you never know when he's going to come back available. And, on the really high-end players, it's probably worthwhile for schools who don't have a chance to get that player realistically to at least stay in their ear and lead them to believe, hey, they're pretty cool guys, or I really like Purdue. I really like that offense. I really like that coach or whatever, because when they come back on the bounce back, you can hit the ground running right away, whereas everybody else is going to be, starting from scratch and whatnot. And a lot of these guys, if they're choosing between Ohio State, Alabama, Auburn, USC, whoever it may be on the front end at a high school, some of those guys, if they transfer, they're going to have those same options, but a lot of them are going to move down. And when I say move down, I don't necessarily mean that as a slight to, programs like Purdue. I mean, they're not going to go to Blue Bloods again because they're transferring for a reason. They're looking for opportunity, whatever it may be. So those really high-end players, it's worth your time probably to at least keep recruiting them in some way, shape, or form, just to keep that relationship and give yourself a chance when, things change down the line, if they change. And it's going to change for a lot of people here in the next couple of years. So this is really going to change the way, players are recruited. It's going to probably cause just as much anxiety for college coaches as the high school recruiting circuit has for many years, if not more so. Because as I said before, if you're recruiting a transfer and you're counting on him to get on your campus on June 8th, and nothing is binding him, or I'm just choosing June 8th out of a hat there.
Yeah.
Nothing's binding that player to your school as of June 1st. That's not the most comfortable position to be in, probably. So, really, really a fascinating time in the history of college football recruiting.
And again, that date too. I don't know, Brian. You look at the calendar next year. If they cut it off on May 1st, how does that what does that change for summer camps in terms of offers, all those kind of things? Is this all not the wild west, but still to be figured out in terms of? I mean, coaches tend to work on calendars kind of to some extent in recruiting. Does this mess this all up, or just make a big challenge as you continue to go through with it?
Well, the whole process is completely fluid anyway. So if you're saying that, what does the transfer market mean for your next high school class? All of that stuff is always subject to change anyway. I think the high school recruiting cycle will begin long before the transfer cycle runs its course. So coaches are going to have to start recruiting a ton of players on the front end and then adjust accordingly. That's kind of the way they do things now anyway, where a school, if they have 20 scholarships to fill, might start off by recruiting 300 players. They might offer 150. They might only want half of those guys. Theoretically, a bunch of the other offer guys might be, triaged down the food chain, so to speak. So it's always been a pretty closely managed, really fluid process anyway. So this is just gonna add one more dynamic. It's kind of what Purdue basketball is dealing with right now, where you have a lot of scholarships to offer. You had the unknown of whether any of your seniors would come back in 2 years, which it doesn't appear as if any of them will. Plus, this is all happening right on top of transfers becoming even more prevalent. So 4 scholarships might actually be 5 scholarships, which could be 6 scholarships, but which could actually be 3 scholarships if your seniors decide to come back. A lot of that stuff has already resolved itself, but that's the sort of fluidity, coaches are going to be dealing with, probably not quite as distinctly moving forward as this year because of the COVID year that everybody's being allowed. That's one more complication to all of this. But coaches are going to have to be agile with all of this stuff from here on out. They're kind of conditioned to be anyway.
Yeah, it's a moving target constantly. Tom, we've had a little bit of news, or at least when we'll know more, obviously in a couple of weeks. Football ticket sales is an interesting topic, only because there's still debate, not debate, but there's still it's still not determined exactly what the rules are going to be for stadiums. We know in the Tippecanoe County that the Tippecanoe County Health Department is going to make a determination, I think, on or around August 1st, at least as of today, and what they're going to allow with respect to mask mandates, capacity. Even though Purdue, everything's moving forward. Purdue sales look to be pretty good. I mean, they talk about 1,500 new season ticket accounts or season ticket sales, 90% renewals. We'll know more in a couple of weeks, but there seems to be a pretty good groundswell so far in the way of ticket sales and a lot of interest as people want to get back into Ross-Ade Stadium, it appears.
Yeah, I think people just want to get out, period. You watch the network news, you read stories of just the restaurants. I mean, every place, it seems like they're packed. People want to get out. They want to do things after 12 months of largely being isolated in our houses. And boy, athletics is such a big part of America, right, guys? And Purdue fans were denied last year any chance to go to a game at Ross-Ade Stadium or Mackey Arena. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of pent-up demand. Again, not just to get out, but also to watch some Purdue football. A lot of curiosity about this 2021 Boilermaker team, fellas. Year 5 for Jeff Brom. Talked about all the new additions, all the moving parts, the remade defensive staff. I mean, the storylines are infinite. And again, I think people are curious to see what's in store. I think there's some promise. And I tell you what, this non-conference schedule to me is awfully intriguing, guys. That opener with Oregon State, a program very much like Purdue, will be a nice litmus test. And you go to Connecticut, you got to take care of business there against Randy Edsall's crew, and then that game in Notre Dame. And then you open up the Big Ten guys at home with back-to-back games with Illinois and Minnesota. So what I'm trying to say, there's a chance for like a 4-1 start here. I don't want to get way ahead of myself, but I think that adds to the excitement and the intrigue that fans have. And I'm sure everybody along Northwestern Avenue is excited that there's a lot of interest in selling tickets to that program this year.
Yeah, and obviously you have the path to getting that winning record is got to happen on the front end for Jeff Brom. And Brian, we've watched over the years, as Tom has, where Jeff's had even in some seasons that have gone well, it's been hard for him to get out of the gate. Even in 2018 when they went to Nashville for the Music City Bowl, you started out with some losses to start the season. So seems to me fast start is stating the obvious based on the schedule, and maybe also changing momentum is going to be critical this year for Purdue in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with getting back to beating the people you should beat. And when you have Oregon State at home and you go to Connecticut, I can't say that I'm an expert on Oregon State. It would seem like that might be a pretty fairly even kind of matchup given where the two programs are coming off last year. But that's an important game. The game at Connecticut, that's an important game. That's a little bit like Nevada a couple of years ago, where it's a team you should beat, but you have to make a trip to get out there. And Purdue really would be wise to win those two games. Obviously, that's Purdue's intent. They don't need me to tell them that, but I don't like, the term must win, but when you've got those games leading into a game at Notre Dame, you don't want to be 1-2 having just played Oregon State and Connecticut. You really want to be 2-1 coming out of those three games going into the Big Ten. You'd love to be 3-0. I think Notre Dame obviously will be a handful, but you have to get back to beating who you should beat. And I guess whether you win those games or not is what tells you who it is you should beat, because it tells you who you are. But Purdue's got to get something positive happening, early in this season. They've got to get the guys in that locker room feeling good about themselves, tasting winning again, get some momentum going, get some excitement again in that locker room, around the program, whatever it might be. really after these past 2 seasons, and last year was different because it was such a mess, and everybody, who was paying attention to things probably was just so happy to have actual football to watch. But that Iowa game, felt like something really significant. And then Purdue couldn't really build on it after that Illinois game. Starting at about halftime of the Illinois game, they couldn't build on it. But you need that sort of start this year with a couple of very beatable out-of-conference opponents, and then you need to build on it. And I think the way to build on it is to win those games, but also draw as much positive as you can. Get everybody on the same page, get everybody energized, get all those players, excited again. And it's something was missing last season. And I know it was a weird year, but something in that locker room was missing. And, some early success maybe helps you get it back.
Yeah, it's going to be a key thing to watch. Tom, we've had and more questions, at least I have, about the one game on the Purdue schedule that has had the most interest, just because the venue doesn't happen till the week, would I think be week 11, November 20th, at Northwestern to play the Wildcats in Wrigley Field, and been interest about trying to get people informed a little bit that may not know till July because it's Northwestern's home game, and they're going to be charging I think it's $110 a ticket, so about 3 times what Northwestern charges for its home game. So it won't be a cheap ticket, and yet there's been a lot of demand, or at least interest, I should say. John Purdue Club folks will have access to them first, and whether there'll be a public sale, we'll find out. But just the intrigue of playing that game in that venue is going to be a lot of fun. And yet I know the season will be well spoken for by that point in time, but it certainly adds a bit of intrigue as you get closer. And Purdue's got such a large fan base in the Chicago area that there's going to be some interest there.
Yeah, boy, what a nice little gem on that 2021 schedule. You're right, Alan. Just the number, like you said, of Purdue alums in the Chicagoland area. We all went to Purdue, and it seemed like every third person you met was from some Chicago suburb. And again, they a lot of them go back up there to get jobs, obviously. So you got to think the turnout will be big. Northwest Indiana has a lot of alums, obviously. It's not a far drive for people from Tippecanoe County. Northwestern sort of had Purdue's number of late, but I tell you what, the Boilers are always right in that game. It seems like they've lost a lot of close games to those guys. Of course, they won the last time in Evanston on that field goal by J.D. Dellinger. And again, they become sort of a measuring stick program, right? That's a program Purdue's got to crawl over if it wants to get in that upper pecking order of the Big Ten West. So not only do you have those stakes, but again, just the fact that the fans can go watch the Boilermakers play in that iconic venue, 1060 West Addison Street there, Alan, your second home, right?
Right. Back in the day, yes.
Take the red train and get off there at Addison. And it's kind of cool to think the Boilermakers going to play a football game there. I remember maybe it was 2012, 2013. I think Illinois played Northwestern there. Remember that?
Yeah, I think it actually was 10, but I don't
remember. Anyway, go ahead. And they had that issue with the short end zone. They had to run every plays one direction. But nonetheless, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch the Boilermakers play up there in Wrigley. And hopefully, like you mentioned earlier, Alan, by November, maybe the stakes of that game will be pretty high for both teams.
Yeah, one of the challenges has been, when talking to some Purdue officials yesterday, is just even on the determining these road allotments for tickets. Mm-hmm. And Purdue obviously has 6 road games this year. Is that the fact that these venues don't know what their capacities are and may not know for a while. So it's just a funky deal. And Illinois has been a state that's been pretty strict, as we know, based on the fact they didn't play high school football last year, et cetera. And that also will play into, you would think by November, and the way things seem to be going, that things will be relatively opened up there, but you never know from that standpoint. Brian, let's switch topics to name, image, and likeness. Obviously a major topic on the college sports landscape, and some states already approving from a legal standpoint. I think Florida, and then we said that Missouri was the last state in the SEC footprint to to make it law. It has not happened in Indiana. We had Mike Babinski talking about it on the site this week in an article Tom wrote. But there's just a lot of moving parts to this, and of course things like influencer from Teamworks. Purdue's got to deal with them to help student athletes supposedly make their brand work. Going to be really interesting time in terms of how this all settles out. Should we just take a step back and relax and let it happen, so to speak? We don't have a choice, but how do you view this going in to the first period of time with this?
I don't think anybody knows. I don't think anybody knows or can predict at this point how this is going to go right away. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. I think there are some pretty strong opinions out there about how this could fundamentally change everything. I don't think it's that big a deal. I think, there are avenues for impropriety, but there are lots of avenues for impropriety right now.
Yeah.
I think the rich will get richer and the poor will get poorer. That's the NCAA's way. I mean, that's there has never been parity in any of this. There have never been credible steps taken toward parity. So if anybody's worried about parity, then that was a topic for years ago. I think, you will see a lot of this will be stuff you don't even see. I don't know if I think we've all kind of viewed this as like a, Mason Gillis showing up in a car commercial or something like that. I don't know if it's going to be that as much as, I don't know why I picked on Mason Gillis there. But I don't know if it's going to be that sort of thing as much as it's going to be like athletes' social presences,
right?
Instagram posts, Twitter posts, which is either going to make their social channels either a lot more interesting or a lot less interesting. I don't know. But I think it's going to give, I think it can give some coaches some peace of mind that their players are going to behave on Twitter, because if everybody's worried about their brand, they're not going to want to say anything stupid or inflammatory, anything like that. So it could regulate, kind of online behavior to a certain extent. I think you're going to see, some male and female athletes alike be able to have camps in their hometowns during the summer, things like that, little things that, again, people aren't going to see, but are just common sense sort of things that, probably should have been going on for years. I don't know if parameters have been set on this. I don't know if like Nike could sign a Zion Williamson to a deal while he's in college. I have no idea any of that stuff. Now, really big stuff like that would be, would probably change things quite a bit, but I don't know if any of that stuff can happen. As of right now, I think you're just looking at autograph signings, camps, social stuff and whatnot. But I know coaches are worried about, like, well, if this, I'll use this example. A few years ago, Carson Edwards was the star of that team, but Matt Harms would have gotten probably some sort of interest for this sort of thing because he was tall, he was charismatic, he was exciting to a certain extent. And when Matt Harms is like the 5th or 6th best player on that team, and Grady Eifert is as unexciting a player, although I mean, depending on how creative you get with things, Grady Eifert might have had some appeal. But if Matt Harms is getting stuff over like a Ryan Klein, does that give Ryan Klein reason to be upset at Matt Harms or whatever? Does that create discord in the locker room? That's something coaches are worried about. But coaches have had to deal with that ever since they got into the business, because playing time is a thing, media attention is a thing. There have always been lightning rods for petty jealousies and internal strife. Girls, I mean, that's there's always going to be that. That's coaches' jobs to figure that out. I mean, that's the players' jobs to be mature and deal with it. And also the players who are getting money or whatever for something to keep their mouth shut about it and not rub people's noses in it. There are complications to this for sure, but I just don't see it being as huge a deal or as cataclysmic and apocalyptic event as everybody seems to think. This is fair. I mean, this is a step toward equity in the whole financial structure of all of this. And it's not the NCAA paying the kids. It's not, the NCAA tournament money being distributed to the athletes in some way, shape, or form. It's simply allowing them to profit in some small way off of what is inherently theirs more than anything else they can ever possibly own.
Yeah. Tom, you've looked at this and wrote the story with Mike Babinski is kind of took the tack that kind of like what Brian said, not sure what the heck's going to happen here. And as we kind of bring this podcast, start to bring it to a close, you have this, it is a X factor out there that you're of the opinion it is what it is. And it's going to be something that the coaches and will work its way into the fabric of college sports.
Yeah, just as Brian talked about, so many unknowns. I mean, what direction is all this going to go? What's it going to look like? How many players are really going to make significant money at various schools? Will there be a competitive advantage, really? I don't know. You can let ideas roll through your head, at least I do. One lead to the other, to another, then you get overwhelmed and you go, oh my God, what's going to happen? I think there's got to be some of that anxiety going on in athletic departments too. So everybody's trying to get their bearings on this. We're seeing legislation passed in states. We're waiting for the NCAA to pass their own legislation, guys. They still have not yet.
Right.
Schools have already partnered with third-party entities to help educate their student athletes on the process. Mike talked about that extensively in the story I posted yesterday on Thursday. And they want to make sure everybody's educated, right? Because everybody's eyes get big when they see, I can make some money, right? Well, there's a lot of other very important details need to be taken care of too, as well, from a banking aspect, from a tax aspect, et cetera, et cetera. So again, there's just still a lot for all of us to get our head around. I'll be interested to see what it does look like, what the normal template will be, what we expect athletes to really earn here. And again, this is a brave new land. We have the transfer portal, we have name, image, likeness, and like I said, we all want to know what the future is, and we're going to have to wait and see how this plays out. But I know Purdue's doing all it can to get systems in places to help their student athletes and to educate them as well. So again, it's going to be fun to see how this all plays out.
Well, and in Georgia state legislature just passed just a loophole in their deal where they may have to share that money with teammates, all these kind of things that need to be worked out, which would be fascinating as well. Brian,
I thought they could claim. I thought it was written in a way that said that schools could claim 75% of the money or something like that.
Right.
Did I mishear that? I didn't read the story.
Yeah, and then they can distribute, and then they would distribute it to other.
Oh, okay.
As a team-wide thing. They couldn't. The Yahoo story, the headline was a little bit misleading in my opinion because it made it sound like the university was going to take 75%. They would take the money and then distribute it among the teams. As if my reading comprehension was above a C+ level, that's what I gleaned from it. So interesting, and like you said, it's a moving parts. And I want to bring this to a close, but Brian, you'll be on tomorrow in Indianapolis with the Rivals camp and watching some football recruiting as well. Give us a quick snapshot of what you expect down there, and then we'll bring this to a close.
I'm going to try to not get sunburned this year, like I always do at these damn football camps. Just a bunch of players on a field. A bunch of Purdue guys are going to be there. Targets, I should say. Joe Strickland will be there, their offensive line target. Ashton Craig, one of their offensive line targets. We'll see what the final list looks like. But there will probably be more than a half a dozen guys Purdue really wants. Dominic Moon, Purdue's linebacker commitment, is going to be there. Interested to see him. Brady Allen is supposed to be there, but he's got bronchitis. So at least it's not COVID, but he may or may not be there. I've already seen him live, so I know what I need to know about him. But there'll be a bunch of Purdue targets there, so I'll have some updates on them next week and whatnot, and that.
All right, sounds good. All right, guys, thanks so much. Always enjoy our conversations, and I hope that our listeners and viewers do as well. I want to thank the Purdue Union Club Hotel, and a reminder, it's a Travel and Leisure World's Best Hotel in Indiana nominee. Voting is open at PurdueUnionClub.com, UnionClubHotel.com, I should say, and for more details and to show your Purdue pride. And don't forget too that you can become a member of GoldandBlack.com. You can. We have free trials available as tags are on tile ads on our site for more information there. So have a great rest of the weekend, all, and we'll look forward to more of the same in our next Saturday simulcast, and also a happy Mother's Day tomorrow to all the mothers out there that are behind a lot of our viewers and readers. So have a great one, all, and we'll talk soon.